In this video, I'm going to be covering question 4, part B from the 2021 AP Calculus AB free response section, no calculator allowed portion. I cover each of these little sub questions A, B, C, and D in their own individual videos. So if you want to see A, C, and D, feel free to check out my other videos. So working on part B right now. The first thing I do on any AP Calc question when I've got a graph in it is I make sure I know what that is the graph of. So looking up top here, I know that I am looking at the graph of f, and I kind of even make it even bigger. I write it down for myself to remind myself over and over again what the graph is. So this is the graph of f of x. And now let's see what the question specifically wants us to know. So they're telling us that let p be the function defined by this equation here. So p of x equals g of x times f of x. And then specifically they want us to find p prime of 3. Well, we know what p of x is. P of x is equal to that equation they give us there, g of x times f of x. So if we're going to go find p prime of 3, we need to find the derivative of p of x. So when we look at this right now, this is two things being multiplied so that we know what we're going to be doing, which is applying the product rule. Whenever you have two things being multiplied and you want to find the derivative, you got to apply that product rule. So my product rule recipe that I use is fg prime plus gf prime. I've got a little, I call them recipes, a little saying that I can just sing song out of my head in 2 seconds for product rule, quotient rule, chain rule. You should have those same things heading into this test. You should be able to just, those rules should just pop out of your head. And it's important, write them down, because if you can see them, you can follow them a lot easier. Remember, test brain works different than your normal brain, so you got to help test brain out a little bit. So what I do is I come in then and I label my 2 chunks. I've got my F piece and I've got my G piece, and then I break them out into their bite-sized little math problems. So F is G of X, and then G is F of X. And now I need to go find G prime and F prime to finish up my product rule. So to find the derivative of F, this is just a notation game. So the derivative of G of X would just be G prime of X. To go find G prime, again, just a notation game. The derivative of F of X would be F prime of X. So there I just refer to these are my ingredients. I've got all my ingredients now and I'm ready to put together my product rule recipe. So I start putting it together. I say P prime of X equals, following the rule, first go grab F, cool, G of X. Then I'm going to multiply that by G prime. So then that would be F prime of X, plus go grab the G piece, which is F of X, and then multiply that by F prime, which would be G prime of X. Now from there, I specifically want to know what does P prime of 3 equal. And so this just works like normal function notation. Whatever I replace x with there, you replace x with everywhere in the equation. So then I want to replace everything with a 3. So this would be g of 3 times f prime of 3 plus f of 3 times g prime of 3. So now we need to go through and find values for each one of these pieces. G of 3, f prime of 3, f of 3, and g prime of 3. Let's start with the more straightforward pieces. So f prime of 3 and f of 3 here, we can use our graph over here to find those pretty quick. When we're talking about a derivative is talking to us about the slope. So they want us to find the slope at x equals 3. And then when it's the original function, that's just the y value at whatever that x value is. So the y value at x equals 3. So we come over to our graph over here, and we've got at 3, we're looking at this point right here. And let's kind of collect this information off to the side. So f prime of 3 equals, we want the slope at 3. When you're doing slope on these tests, I tell you, if you can get rise over run, your old school way of finding slope down, that's going to be the quickest and easiest way to find slopes off of graphs. You don't want to have to be doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 on straightforward graphs like this. It's just going to suck up your time unnecessarily. So in this problem, I would get a rise of 1, it goes up 1, and then to get to this other point over here, that would be a run of 1. So this was a rise of 1, run of 1, so we got 1 over 1, which equals 1. So our slope at 3, our f prime of 3 is going to equal 1. Now we're going to come back and we're going to do the same thing. Let's take a look at what f of 3 is. F of 3 is now the y value at 3. Well, there's the dot, and so the y value that goes with that is going to be negative 3. So we got two of our pieces that we need to plug into this formula. And now we're going to go after the other pieces. They're not crazy complicated, but they're just a little bit different than reading it straight off the graph like we did with the last two. So let's kind of look at these pieces here. So if I wanted to find g of 3, I need an equation for g to plug 3 into. And that means I need to come up here and I look and I say, oh, there's my equation for g of x. So g of x is equal to the integral from 0 to x of f of t dt. So again, function notation works the same even when you're using an integral as your equation. Whatever I replace x with here, you replace x within the formula. So g of 3 is really the integral from 0 to 3 of f of t dt. Well, what is that telling us? A definite integral is the area between the curve and the x-axis. And in this situation, between our lower bound of x equals 0 and our upper bound of x equals 3. So now we come over to our graph and we have to find out what that is. So we want the area between the curve and the x-axis from 0 over to 3 right here. So what that means is you're going to have to break this up into a couple of geometric shapes that you got to be comfortable with. So in this situation, I've got a triangle right here. So that would be my first area. So that's going to be a 1/2 base times height. So when we go to do area formulas, area of a triangle, you better have down when you hit this test, the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So the base on this, that would be the bottom here. That base is going to be 1. The height is going to be our full value up there. That's going to be 4. So we get 1/2 base times height. That section is positive, right? And then as I go over to do the other stuff, I've got to realize that I'm dropping down below the x-axis. So all of this area down here, this is all now going to be negative area. So I've got a triangle here. I've got another set of rectangles coming in through there, and then I got a little bitty triangle at the very bottom. What we'll kind of notice is, one of the things to take note of is when pieces cancel each other out. Like this left-hand side here, this left-hand portion of the triangle, it's the exact same as that upper triangle. We'd be looking at a plus 1/2, the base is 1, and this time the height is going down here, and so that's where we would end up with a height of -4. So those two things we're going to end up canceling each other out, and so what we end up at the rest of this is we have a rectangle here. So we've got a rectangle for these first few boxes, and so the area of a rectangle formula, again, you just got to know these things. The area of a rectangle would be base times height. The base on this would be 1. The height on that would be a -3. And then we would add to that this itty bitty little triangle at the very bottom here. And so that would be a 1/2. We would have a base of 1 and a height of 1 as we look at that little triangle. It'd be a -1 actually on the height. So we'd end up with -3 minus 1/2. And so putting that together, -3, finding your common denominator, that would be -6 over 2 minus 1 over 2. So we end up with -7 over 2. So again, grabbing our information, we just found out that g of 3 is equal to -7 over 2. Then the last bit here is we need to come up with what does g prime of 3 equal. So we did this back on part A, but like I said, that's a different video. So we know g of x is equal to the integral from 0 to x of f of t dt. Well, to find the derivative of g, we have to take the derivative of both sides of this. And that's where you're looking at the Fundamental Theorem of Calculus Part 1. Anytime you've got this little variable up there, an equation up in your bound on an integral, 99 times out of 100 you're applying this Fundamental Theorem of Calculus Part 1. And what that says is when I take the derivative of this side, I would get g prime of x. And when I take the derivative of the right-hand side, derivatives and antiderivatives cancel each other out, and that x just drops straight in. And so what I know is g prime of x is actually equal to f of x. So if I want to know what does g prime of 3 equal, that's the same as asking you what does f of 3 equal. And we already got that out. We know that f of 3 is equal to negative 3, which tells us that g prime of 3 is also equal to negative 3. So then we grab g prime of 3 and we know that that is now equal to negative 3. From there, we have all the pieces of the puzzle to finally put together our final answer for our derivative, p prime of 3. So we go grab g of 3, which is negative 7 over 2. We're going to multiply that by f prime of 3, which is 1, plus f of 3, which is negative 3, times g prime of 3, which is also negative 3. And then we just start cleaning the thing up here. So then we end up with negative 7 over 2 when we multiply it by 1. Negative 3 times negative 3 is going to get us a positive 9. We now get the fun of finding our common denominator again. So this would be negative 7 over 2. That's 9 over 1. So the common denominator would be 2. So this would be 18 over 2. And then we bring those together. 18 over 2 minus 7 over 2 is going to get us 11 over 2, and that's going to be our final answer for what p prime of 3 equals. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please click that like button and subscribe, and also share it with your friends and anyone else you know who might be crying about an upcoming AP Calc test. You can find more videos from me, more sample AP Calc questions, and my complete AP Calc study guide over at my website, apcalcprep.com. Have a great one.